Hey, it's Danny from projectmanaverse.com, and in this video I'm going to talk about the importance of project testing. So let's jump straight in. So let's set a bit of context first of all. Testing is a fundamental part of any project. It's one of the critical phases of the project. And if you build something, which you will be doing if you're an IT project manager, when I say build something, I mean develop something or code something. It's going to be some kind of software or application or something to do with the infrastructure that your application sits on. Once you've done that, you can't just give it straight to the customers to use and hope for the best. You need to test it thoroughly to identify issues and all kinds of things. So it's a really important part of the project life cycle. And I think sometimes we forget why it's important, and we forget some of the nuances about this testing phase and what it's really there to do. So in this video, I'm going to go over 6 key reasons why the testing phase is very important. And if you're new to project management, it's going to give you a good overview and understanding of the testing phase as well. So let's jump into it. So number one, the first thing is it's important for identifying defects, and that's really the main purpose of testing the software. When you build something, it's never going to be perfect the first time. It's not going to work exactly as you wanted it to, or exactly as you envisioned it working. There's going to be flaws with the system, and we call those flaws defects. So you have to thoroughly test every aspect of the system, test all the functionality end to end, make sure you really get in there and almost try to break it, and that'll flush out these defects. So that gives you a chance to fix them before you go live with the product. So that's the key reason for testing. It's to identify the defects. That's number one. Number two, it helps you to identify missed requirements. So when you build something on your project, you're building that, or your engineers are building that off a design, and that design has been built off a set of requirements. It's been translated from a set of requirements. And what you should be doing is when you get to your testing phase, you want to make sure you can trace back every single test that you are doing back to every single requirement. That way you know that every single requirement on your project, on your design, has been proven because you're testing it. You can test that it's been done. So what it does by doing that, you're going through each and every requirement and you're testing it, and it just makes sure, it's a control to make sure that you delivered all those requirements and all the requirements have been met. If you've got a big hole in your requirements, or not a big hole, even a small hole, let's say 5% of your requirements cannot be tested, then that means they probably haven't been built. There's a problem there. So by testing it and doing that traceability from test to requirement, you can make sure and ensure that you have delivered all your requirements. So that's the second reason. Reason number three, it helps you to identify if you have designed a thing incorrectly. So sometimes when you're doing testing, it feels like you've got a defect, something's not quite working correctly, and it might not be that a requirement has been missed and that it's a defect. It might not be that. Usually it is, but sometimes the requirements have been met, they have been delivered, but your requirement wasn't quite right to begin with, or the design of the thing that you've done isn't going to work as you thought it would do. So you need to change that. And yeah, that's really important because you can't always identify that until you actually get into the guts of the testing. So by testing things thoroughly, it does let you, it does confirm that your design has been correct and the thing is going to work correctly. And quite often you'll have to go back to the design and change a few things, and that's perfectly normal, but that's a very good reason for testing things thoroughly. It will ensure that your design is correct. Okay, number 4 is it validates the customer experience, or it ensures that the customer is going to have a good experience. Now you do this in the user acceptance testing phase of the testing, and that's where the ultimate end user of the application, if it's in the business and you're doing this as an internal application that your organization uses, usually you have people in the business part of your project team, and they will be testing the application themselves. If it's an external testing, we have things like beta testing, there's other means of it, but what you want to do is either get an ultimate end customer to test the application before it goes live, or at least put yourself in the shoes of the customer and test it from their perspective perspective. So you can really see, is it a good experience? Do the customers enjoy the product? Is it clunky? Is it difficult to work with? Is it is it not intuitive, or is it nice and smooth? You need to get that feedback and ensure that the customer's getting the best possible experience from their perspective. Without testing, you're going to be gambling that it's going to be a good customer experience when you put it live, and you don't want to do that. You want to test it in advance. So that's reason number 4. Okay, reason number 5 is to ensure that the application works with all the processes that it needs to work with. Because when you're building an application, or when you're using an application, it's often not just used in isolation. Often there's processes that are run in conjunction with that application, and there could be upstream systems or downstream systems that need to interact with each other. So you need to make sure that what you're doing fits in with those everyday processes, and it fits in with those other applications. So if there's interactions between those applications and data is being transferred, let's say for example by a file transfer, you need to ensure that file transfer is working and the data is in the right format, and everything is all seamless and it all fits together, and that the everyday uses that the application is used for work with the everyday processes that your customer is intending to use it for. So it's not just the application, they're using it for a purpose, and it's often not just in isolation. It needs to be used alongside some kind of everyday process or other application. So you need to make sure you test it to make sure it's going to work in that wider context and not just in isolation. Okay, number 6, the final one, is to ensure that the performance of the application is working correctly. So it's not just about functionality, it's not just about user experience, but it's also about performance. I suppose performance does tie into user experience to some degree, but if the application is very slow because there's just too much strain on the servers, or you've got too many concurrent users, or if it's like a batch system where you're transferring data by file transfers in batches, you need to make sure those batches are run to the SLAs or the time frames they need to be delivered within, so that everything's working on time and the performance isn't slow and the service can handle it. You don't want to risk only learning about that when you go live, because that would be a disaster. If you put it live, then the server just crashes because the performance is too slow, or it's just a really bad, slow experience. It takes forever to go from screen to screen. You need to make sure that everything's nice and fast and whizzy, and if you have loads of users on there, it's not going to impact the performance of the application. That's reason number 6, to check the performance. Okay, so that is the video. I'll do a very quick recap and then we'll call it a day. So what are the 6 key benefits of testing, or the 6 important reasons for testing? Number 1 is to flush out the defects. Number 2 is to ensure that you've met all the requirements and no requirements have been missed. Number 3 is to ensure that your design is correct and it's working properly and your design hasn't got any flaws. Number 4 is to ensure a good customer experience of the application. Number 5 is to ensure that the application works with the everyday processes that it's meant to be used alongside. And number 6 is to ensure the performance of the application is working correctly as well. Okay, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and until tomorrow, please take care.